The default number one is gone. Who's the new best coach in the Big Ten? MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, ranking the coaches on all the Power 5 conferences. We have posted the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the ACC. We make our next stop with the 14 teams in the Big Ten. So check out those videos, and I'll remind you here that we are ranking these coaches based on what they can do right now. So maybe some coaches have a great legacy, but they're not nearly as effective right now as they have been in the past. Possibly a Les Miles. We'll take that into consideration. Certainly, the past history and proving themselves means a whole bunch. But I'm ranking these coaches right now. So if this was 10 years ago when I was ranking Bobby Bowden and Joe Paterno, I would not rank them nearly as high as their legacy would indicate that they should be ranked, because at that point in time, they were not near the best coaches in the country. All right, let's get to the Big Ten right now in 2019. And for the new coaches, as you've seen in the Pac-12, the Big 12, and the ACC, what I basically do is I project how good I think they're going to be. But more than that, I basically take a neutral stance, and I rank all the coaches that I believe have been successful, are doing a nice job, a decent job. I rank them above the new kids on the block, and then I rank those coaches that I think have been a bit of a failure to date below the guys that are neutral, because they're new to that program, and especially coaches that are new to FBS football as head coaches. All right, let's get to the Big Ten. Worst program in the conference, worst team in the conference in the last couple years, worst coach in the conference right now as we rank it, Chris Ash of Rutgers. He's got a nice track record as a defensive coordinator at Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Arkansas. Did a nice job there. Greg Schiano, of course, proved at Rutgers that you can win. Rutgers was awful for decades. Greg Schiano won there, and Kyle Flood took over, and he was winning and taking the Scarlet Knights to bowl games. They've got the New Jersey recruiting pipeline. Pennsylvania, Maryland are good recruiting states as well. All right, but Flood brought on a flood of controversy, criminal, academic, drug issues, and of course he was exited. Bring in Chris Ash. Now the program's in much better shape from the standpoint of credibility, but 7-29, 3-24 in the Big Ten. So Chris Ash has been there for a while. That's 27 games in the Big Ten. That's 3 seasons, 9 per season. So this is his 4th season, so it's time to see some benefits. And if anything, we saw Rutgers' worst product in 2018 at 1-11, 0-9 in the conference, and they just didn't lose games. They lost to Kansas by 41 points. They lost to Buffalo. Yes, Buffalo was probably the best team in the MAC, even though they lost the championship game. But Rutgers of the Big Ten lost to Buffalo of the MAC by 29 points. Later in this season, Rutgers showed some life. They showed some grit and some toughness. They didn't give up, and we've got to credit Ash to a certain extent for that. They took on the top half of the Big Ten and played very competitive against the likes of Northwestern, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Michigan State. Chris Ash is not getting the job done on the recruiting trail right now. 62nd in the country this past recruiting cycle, 57th the year before, bottom 2 in the Big Ten, both classes. And again, he's got a decent area to work with in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. Chris Ash at number 14 in the Big Ten. At number 13, we've got the new coach at Maryland, Michael Locksley, coming from Alabama, where he was offensive analyst and offensive coordinator after going 3-31, 2-26 at his stay at New Mexico, 1-5 back in 2015 as an interim coach at Maryland. Okay, his stay at New Mexico was riddled with awful on-the-field performance, of course, 2-26, various off-the-field issues, sex and age discrimination allegations brought against him. Those were withdrawn. An altercation with an assistant coach that resulted in a 10-game suspension for Mike Locksley, and then an arrest of a minor for a DWI who was registered driving the car of Locksley's son, and there was a bit of a messy situation there. Locksley, of course, has been working with Nick Saban over the past several seasons, hopefully rubbing shoulders with the best in the business, maybe the best of all time, in terms of not just football acumen, but how you run a program, how you deal with young people, how you deal with situations, and you yourself show leadership and respect toward others and demand respect, hopefully has been a lesson for Mike Locksley. But right now, number 13 in the Big Ten, starting his first season with the Terps. All right, at number 12, we've got Tom Allen of Indiana. And if this was a listing of energy, passion, emotions, Tom Allen would be at the top, number one. But it's about performance. And again, consider that I'm taking into consideration where that particular coach is coaching. Tom Allen would not be expected to win as much in my rankings at Indiana than he would be at Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State. All right, so I very much take that into consideration. The recruiting footprint, the prestige of the program, the name brand, the resources they give, the money they give, all of that taken into consideration. Tom Allen, 5-7, 5-7 the last 2 years, 2-7, 2-7 in the Big Ten. And he pretty much took over from the standpoint from Kevin Wilson that we're going to play a lot of close games and be competitive against the best teams in the Big Ten, but we're always going to lose these games. We're never going to pull off that upset. In 2017, in particular, he had close losses against Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State. Then in 2018, they got off to a 3-0 start. They beat Virginia, who, of course, turned out to be a pretty good team, like a top 25-30 team. And despite the final score in some of these games, they played Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan tough again. But they lost all those games. A final game showdown against Purdue in the old Oak and Bucket game, both resulting in losses, has taken Indiana out of postseason play. Needed that sixth win both seasons, and the Boilers were able to get the win over Indiana. So again, I love the energy, the passion, the emotions, and I don't expect Indiana to win big with anybody there as coach. But 4-14 in the Big Ten is not good anywhere. Tom Allen needs to get this team to postseason play, and he needs to win 3 to 4 games in the Big Ten. Start going 3-6, 4-5 in the Big Ten, maybe even 5-4 to gain some respect and shoot up these rankings. Tom Allen, Indiana, number 12. Number 11, we've got a Super Bowl coach in Lovie Smith. Yes. So do I take that into consideration? Not really. Not really from a technical standpoint in applying the rankings, but sure, it's in my mind that this guy was good enough to not only get to a Super Bowl with the Chicago Bears, but also with Chicago and Tampa Bay, get to multiple playoffs, get to another NFC championship game and lose to Green Bay, also have a winning NFL record over about 145 games. So that's pretty good. 6 years, $21 million contract to turn around Illinois football that had been down forever. Ron Zook took them to the Rose Bowl in 2007, but the program has been down ever since, and most recently under the leadership or lack thereof from Tim Beckman, Bill Cubitt, Beckman mostly for 3 seasons. This program was in shambles when Lovie Smith took it over, so I've got to take that, of course, into consideration, and the fans had completely lost interest. The attendance had plummeted down to basically nothing, like an embarrassment of a MAC-looking stadium late in the season at Illinois. Lovie Smith, 9-27, 4-23 in the Big Ten, so he's been around 3 seasons. Had his best year record-wise this past season, so there is some hope, 4-8, 2-7 in the Big Ten. But the recruiting class is considering that Illinois has decent football talent, and he can go down to St. Louis, Kansas City, and pull some of those kids up there to Champaign. Have not been good. 59th and 53rd in the country the last 2 years, bottom 3 in the Big Ten. Lovie Smith needs to recruit. He can connect to young people. He's got a name brand. He himself, not necessarily the program. We'll see if Lovie Smith can turn it around at Illinois. And maybe we give them that Indiana bar of let's start to win 4 and 5 games in the conference. Lovie Smith at number 11 from Illinois. Number 10 is Ryan Day, Ohio State. Now, of course, he's got the keys to the car. He's got possibly the best football factory in all of America when you take everything into consideration. All right. The 25th head coach at Ohio State. Basically, in a discussion I had recently with Steve Dace from Michigan Podcast, he put it that you win 75% of your games at Ohio State almost automatically. So the bar is above that. Well, Urban Meyer won 91% of his games and lost a few key games that would have won him championships, but still 91% of his games. Ryan Day just turned 40, and Ohio State would not be hiring him if they, number one, didn't have confidence in what he had already shown them as a offensive mind, and then as a leader who had to take over the team for 3 games last year, and that was key to ushering in the Ryan Day era, is that he was able to show that he could coach on game day for 3 weeks. Not against the toughest competition, and with Urban Meyer as still the head coach, so he wasn't running his program. I would think that he would basically run the program similar to Urban Meyer, but install his own personality and his own viewpoint to a certain extent. So he's a passing game genius, offensive coordinator type, molds quarterbacks. He's been at Boston College and Ohio State in that position, also in the NFL with Philadelphia and San Francisco. His first recruiting class seemed to have slumped compared to the Urban Meyer standard, but consider that he had a small class of just 15 or 16 recruits, and based on player rating, 3rd in the country in the quality of recruit. So Ryan Day, we place at number 10 right now from Ohio State. Number 9, P.J. Fleck, Minnesota. I don't know where I would have placed P.J. Fleck in early November because Minnesota had the bad first season under Fleck, which is understandable in the transition, and then they got off to an awful start. They lost to Maryland by 29 points. They lost to Nebraska by 25, gave up 53 in that game. They lost to Illinois. Illinois is awful. Minnesota lost to Illinois by 24 points and gave up 55. So P.J. Fleck made a bold in-season move, and he fired his defensive coordinator, Rob Smith. And what happened? They beat Purdue 41-10. They lost a very competitive game with Northwestern 24-14. So they were very competitive in that game against the division champion. Then they just rolled Wisconsin 37-15. Not a vintage Wisconsin team, but still a good team. Still a top 25-35 type team. Beat them 37-15, marched on to a bowl game against Georgia Tech. And consider, Minnesota went 3-6 in the Big Ten. Georgia Tech was a 5-3 team in the ACC. Minnesota beat them by 24 points. So I've got to consider P.J. Fleck might be doing in Minnesota what he did at Western Michigan, which, of course, is going to be much more difficult in the Big Ten. So he's got a brand new, shiny, new facility on its way to lull in some recruits. And, of course, he's got a silver tongue, P.J. Fleck does. Just ask Coach Kill. But that's another story. At Western Michigan, consider the turnaround under P.J. Fleck. 1-11 his first year in 2013. 3 years later, they went 13-1, lone loss to Wisconsin in the Cotton Bowl. Cotton Bowl at Western Michigan. That's still kind of hard for me to fathom. So P.J. Fleck, good stretch run in November. He's got his quarterback in play. He's rowing the boat. Started off 0-4 in the Big Ten, finished strong. P.J. Fleck at number 9, Minnesota. All right, number 8, we go to Purdue and Jeff Brohm. Now, again, had we produced this video following the Ohio State game and everything that looked bright, not just beating Ohio State, we didn't know that they were that good. We didn't think it. But that really projected good for Purdue football, considering Jeff Brohm came in, took over a program that had struggled for a long time, much like what we're talking about with Illinois and Indiana. Took them to a bowl game and pulled off an upset against Arizona. And then they get off to this tremendous start with this impressive win against Ohio State by 29 points. So if every day was like, let's get the date, October 20th last year, then Jeff Brohm would be number 1. But the facts are that, yes, he took over a down program and he turned them around quickly. And surprisingly, it happened on defense more than on offense. 7-6 last year, 4-5 in the Big Ten. Then they beat Arizona in the bowl game. Then last year, the Ohio State game was really a big highlight. They also beat Iowa at home on a last-second field goal. Then it was all downhill from there, and it culminated with a crash landing against Auburn, 63-7 in the bowl game. So he did go 5-4 in the Big Ten, and we got Jeff Brohm at number 8. Still some hope there at Purdue. Certainly doing the job at Purdue, but let's back off. hit the brakes just a tad on Jeff Brohm's performance and the elevation of Purdue football. The next jump is going to be more difficult because the first jump, you start to go from winning 2 and 3 games a year, and you show that you can start beating Illinois and Rutgers and Indiana and those teams. But then the next jump means that you got to start beating the Wisconsins and the Iowas and the Northwesterns consistently, and Jeff Brohm has yet to do that. We will wait and see. Our number 8 coach in the Big Ten is Jeff Brohm. At number 7, Kirk Ferentz of Iowa. He is the dean of Big Ten coaches. And I really have trouble ranking this particular coach. He's had consistency throughout his tenure. When you think 8-4 football teams, you think Iowa. They go 8-4 just about every year, don't they? But man, he started off so well. He was considered a top 5 coach nationally years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Took over for Hayden Fry. 1999 went 1-10. Then he quickly, by 2002, tied for the Big Ten championship and went to the Orange Bowl. From 2002 to 2004, Iowa football went 20-4 in the Big Ten. They finished in the top 10 in the nation 3 consecutive years, and he was considered an elite head coach. But since 2004, they've only finished in the top 10 twice. They've only finished ranked 4 times in 14 years at Iowa. Iowa has a proud football history, and now they're only finishing ranked every 3 or 4 years, and not ranked that high. This is the 8-5 program. Kirk Ferentz recruits in the top 50, doesn't do much better than that, and his typical MO is that he makes them better. Well, he used to take top 50 talent and make it top 10, 15 in the nation on the field. And now he's taking top 50 talent, and he's just making it into the top 35 or 40. Kirk Ferentz at number 7 from Iowa. All right, at number 6, we've got James Franklin from Penn State. He made a statement after his most recent gut-wrenching loss to Ohio State 27-26 after leading by 2 scores with 5 minutes left by saying, "We're great. We need to be elite like them." Okay, let's back off a little bit on the word great. Is Penn State great? No, they're good. They might be even better than good, but in my book, great means great. Great means, for a particular player, Hall of Fame. For a program, that means basically elite. Elite and great, I find them to be in the same category, and Penn State's not there. Okay, the good is that he took over a program that was still recovering from the Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky nightmare. Bill O'Brien did most of the groundwork in gaining back the respect and the credibility and bringing in top recruits and laying the groundwork that, okay, this is going to be fine. This program is not going to be damned for the next 10 years like many of us thought at the time. The bowl ban had subsided. The scholarships were coming back. So Bill O'Brien he laid the groundwork for sure and did much more than that. He won 7 and 8 games for 2 years, which seemed like a miracle at the time. James Franklin comes in and goes 7-6 and 7-6. Didn't really improve the product on the field, but he was recruiting better. Then he gets off to a 3-2 start in 2016, which doesn't sound awful, except that they lost to Pitt. And they also lost to Michigan 49-10. And nobody saw this coming. They went immediately from 49-10 in Ann Arbor to rolling off 7 consecutive wins, beating Ohio State, going to the Rose Bowl, winning the Big Ten championship. And ever since that midseason slump, losing to Pitt in Michigan in 2016, James Franklin is 28-7. Gone to the Rose Bowl, won the Big Ten championship, won a Fiesta Bowl against Washington, but they keep losing the big games, notably against Ohio State, but also against some other schools like a Michigan this year in which they did not compete. Again, for the second straight trip to Michigan, they got rolled. So they are not quite there. just to compete in the division, yet alone nationally. James Franklin is stockpiling talent. Now, Urban Meyer's gone. Maybe he's got a chance to take down Ohio State. But first, he's got to take down Michigan and Michigan State on a regular basis. They lost to the Spartans again this year. James Franklin at number 6. The recruiting has been excellent. They had the big run in 2016, another top 10 team in 2017. But let's beat the division rivals for a higher ranking among our coaches' rankings here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. All right, at number 5, we go to Nebraska and Scott Frost. Has he done it at his current stop? Of course not. He's only had one season. But consider again, what he did at UCF is stellar. 0-12 under George O'Leary. Scott Frost takes over and takes this team to a bowl game immediately, and then goes 13-0 2 years later, from 0-12 to 13-0. All right, in 2018, we saw what Scott Frost could bring to Nebraska in terms of development and rebuilding, and seeing the progression of a football team from September to November. It was pretty astonishing. It was marked, substantial improvement. Yeah, the bottom line that they went 4-8, 3-6 in the Big Ten. But they won 4 of their last 6 games, including against Minnesota and Michigan State, 2 pretty decent teams. The losses against Ohio State by 5 points in Columbus, and also losing on the last play of the season against Iowa, a really good team that went on to a bowl game to defeat Mississippi State. Nebraska improved decidedly. They lost to Iowa on a last-second field goal, 31-28. He's got Adrian Martinez in play. He's going to look to improve him, make him a much better quarterback, making better decisions. Hopefully he can keep him healthy. Scott Frost is in good position. He's brought in 2 very solid top 20 to top 25 classes, and he's ready to go there at Nebraska. Scott Frost, number 5. All right, we go to Wisconsin and Paul Chryst at number 4. He took over a winning program that was, of course, originally established by Barry Alvarez and continued by Brett Bielema and Gary Anderson. But Paul Chryst is 42-12. He's 27-8 in the Big Ten. He's won the West twice. He's finished in the top 10 twice. He's 4-0 in bowl games. I love that. 2 of those in the New Year's 6 round against Miami and Western Michigan. Offensive coordinator who knew Wisconsin football and what to do with Wisconsin-type talent. Of course, he played there. So he was the offensive coordinator there from 2005 through 11 under multiple head coaches. And he knows the Wisconsin run game, and he knows the program, and it shows on the field. They know who they are. They even suffered through what for them is a down year and still won a bowl game by 32 points and finished 8-5 this past season. That's as low as it gets at Wisconsin. This is a solid program under a solid coach, and when I say solid, I mean solid nationally. Top 15 nationally, Paul Chryst, number 4 in the Big Ten. All right, at number 3, we've got an interesting case with Mark Dantonio of Michigan State. This guy at his peak was arguably doing a better job than anybody at a high level in college football anywhere. Consider, if you go back through the history of Michigan State football, all the way back into the early 70s through 10 years ago, what was Michigan State? They were a very underachieving program, regardless of what coach they brought in there. I always thought, why is Michigan State not winning more? And excluding the 10-win season every decade, 1997 Plaxico Burress Citrus Bowl win over Florida, or the 87 Rose Bowl team that beat USC with Percy Snow and Lorenzo White, those were total aberrations once every 10 or 15 or 20 years. Michigan State was going 7-5, 6-6, 5-6, 6-5, 7-5. That was Michigan State football. A good year was 8-4. Mark Dantonio took over, and suddenly they're finishing in the top 5 in the nation. They're beating teams like Georgia and TCU and Baylor and in Stanford in Rose Bowls and Cotton Bowls. They became a brand. He became a brand in college football. Kind of this odd approach to the game where it was about nuts and bolts, defense, run game, offensive line, but at the same time, we're going to pull some trick plays on you. when you're least expecting it, and they're going to be masterfully created and schemed and executed. And he won a number of big games that way. From 2010 to 15, this was an elite program. 65-16, 32-8 in the Big Ten, 3 Big Ten championships, 4 top 10 finishes. Now they've leveled off. 2016 was a disaster, but an aberration at 3-9. They bounced back to 10-3 2 years ago in 2017, but I think that was a bit of a mirage. When they played the better teams, they showed that they weren't quite back. And then this past season, 7-6. And I could take you through the litany of offensive struggles. The defense was good, but I think Michigan State football is back to somewhere close where it should be. Mark Dantonio is still a very quality, respected coach, but he somehow caught lightning in a bottle, and I think he made the most of his situation and maximized the talent and the situation for about 5 to 6 seasons. And now we're going to see Michigan State settle into an 8-4, 7-5 range under Mark Dantonio, but still a quality guy and coach, number 3 in the Big Ten. At number 2, this is going to be the selection that is going to bring the most comments, I believe. We go to Ann Arbor and the number 2 coach in the Big Ten, Jim Harbaugh. Let's not discount, although we're ranking and rating these coaches right now, what Jim Harbaugh did at San Diego, Stanford, and with the San Francisco 49ers. He took awful situations and made them big winning situations. Again, if a pass gets completed at the end of the Super Bowl, Jim Harbaugh's a Super Bowl winning coach. He basically put his team in position to win a Super Bowl. He took a 2-14 NFL team and took them to 3 NFC championship games and went to a Super Bowl and was competitive in the Super Bowl. He took them from bottom of the NFL to elite. He had the best record in the NFL during his tenure. He did the same thing at San Diego and Stanford. All right, we know what the deal is at Michigan. He has upgraded the talent and the play on the field. But in the key situations, he's let us down. Michigan football, before he got there during the same span of time, went 18-14 in the Big Ten. Just over 500. Jim Harbaugh's gone 26-9 in the Big Ten. Michigan football went 31-20 before he arrived, 38-14 since. So in 7 or 8 game improvement. But again, the perception is this guy's not getting it done because he was hired and paid elite money at an elite football factory to win and win big. And he's not beating the right teams. Got to beat Ohio State. Got to win bowl games. All right. At number 1 in the Big Ten, we go to what has traditionally been the most unlikely of places for winning football, and that's Northwestern. And for you younger viewers, you see Northwestern as a pretty good football program. Let me take you back decades to a program that had not won a bowl game for 64 years until Pat Fitzgerald got that done in 2012. One that had consistently gone 0-11, 1-10, 2-9, 0-11, 2-9, 1-10, over and over and over and over for decades through the 70s and 80s and early 90s. Then other coaches turned it around. So Pat Fitzgerald did not inherit that Northwestern. But this is still Northwestern, where the academic standards make it difficult. And the lack of resources and the lack of football support by the community. Check out a Northwestern football game, even if they're playing one in the Big Ten against a key opponent, as they did this past season. When they're playing at Ryan Field, look at it. First of all, it looks like a high school stadium. Secondly, it's not full. So the support's not necessarily there from the fan base or the alumni. But man, this guy's getting it done, isn't he? Now, it's not all been great under Pat Fitzgerald. This was not an immediate turnaround. This is his 14th season coming up in 2019, and he has finished under 500 4 times, most recently in 2014. And the record's not sterling, But recently, the upgrade has been significant. 10-3 twice in the last few years, including 15-3 in the Big Ten the last 2 seasons. He won the Big Ten championship on the Western side, got his team to Indianapolis for the first time ever. Think about this. Northwestern has been ranked in the final AP poll 8 times prior to Pat Fitzgerald's arrival. He has finished ranked 4 of the last 7 years. And in 2018, they opened a new $260 million football facility. So Pat Fitzgerald's going to have the ability to recruit even better. And he needs to do that if he's going to hold off the likes of Minnesota, Nebraska, those rebirths under Scott Frost and P.J. Fleck. But in addition to that, the established power of Wisconsin, Iowa. So Northwestern in a good position, better than they've been in so long. You'd have to go back to the Parsegan era in the 1960s and 70s.